Hello, and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we are reviewing Trap. Directed by M. Night Shyamalan, Trap follows a man and his teenage daughter who realize they're at the center of a dark and sinister event while watching a concert. The film stars Josh Hartnett, Ariel Donoghue, and Saleka Shyamalan. So Jeffrey, what did you think about Trap?
I think this is the first thing I said to you when I came out of this, but Shyamalan is so interesting to me because he only has one masterpiece, in my opinion, which is The Sixth Sense. Some people think Unbreakable is a masterpiece. I don't. I think it's really good, though. But he has a slew of movies that are flawed but pretty good, and then another whole bunch of movies that are like outright disasters, like laughably bad. So he's a really interesting filmmaker to me. He has been kind of going through a bit of a resurgence lately. Like his past, I would say, 5 or 6 films have been pretty good. I really liked A Knock at the Cabin.
I thought Split was pretty good.
Split was good. Oh, I liked Old as well. Anyway, I've ever since The Visit, I've generally liked his films. I think that's been, the past like decade or so. But interestingly, mostly from like a technical perspective, he's very precise. Like he's a very good filmmaker. His use of focus and different lenses and space in the frame is really off-putting and tense. Like he's very good at making a thriller. But his direction of actors and a lot of his dialogue writing is like really weird, like just strangely alien. That hasn't been his strong suit for most of his films, even as the writing is pretty good in terms of concepts and twists and plot structures. Trap, again, is a great concept. He essentially pitched this as what would happen if a Hitchcock movie took place at a Taylor Swift concert. Generally speaking, I really enjoyed this movie. Again, from a technical perspective, I think it's really well made. Maybe we'll get into some of that. Its main flaws are like twofold. It overstays its welcome. It starts repeating its structure. And I think most notably, it requires a massive suspension of disbelief at a variety of convenient things.
Yes.
If you want to have a good time during this movie, there's a lot of logical leaps that you just kind of have to go with. If you're one of those viewers that really gets caught up in the realistic details of a sequence, you'll probably have a lot of trouble with this movie. My perspective and my taste as a critic, I tend to be pretty forgiving of those things, those logical inconsistencies. I'm not saying that's the right or wrong way to look at it. They just personally don't bother me very much. I tend to like go with the film on its own logic and let it just wash over me in that way. I more look for how it's sold to me as something reasonable within the world of the film rather than something that could realistically happen.
That is very interesting that you mentioned that particular statement.
Generally speaking, though, I enjoyed this. I'd say roughly from the 1 hour mark to the 1 hour 25 minute mark, this movie like absolutely rocks. There's a 25-minute sequence that's just terrific. I would say that your mileage may vary on the rest of it, but generally speaking, I thought it was well made and interesting, if like extremely flawed.
All right, I found a lot of interesting things that you mentioned there, particularly with how you like when a film stays within the realm of what it's like doing. You mentioned it better than how I just rephrased it, but anyways, this movie is very extremely cheesy. And I'm having a lot of difficulty deciding if I mean that endearingly or critically in this particular film. I think that distinction really comes down to whether the cheesiness is intentional or not. On one hand, I see the cheesy scenes from the concert where the artist talks about like some generic experience in her life, which absolutely anybody can relate to, and asking the audience members to put their phones up and put their lights on if they agree. And I'm just like, okay, that's very relatable. It's cheesy because it's true.
Yeah.
And then I see all these scenes with Josh Hartnett's character just staring out windows and seeing hordes of cops around. And I'm just like, what purpose does this serve? For now, all I can really deduce from those thoughts is that the film is super cheesy, and maybe in some ways that is an endearing quality, and in others it's a very cringy one.
This whole concept of the plot would just never happen.
I'm going to get into that.
Yeah,
actually.
sorry.
As you had mentioned, the writing contributes to a lot of this cheesiness. I would be very interested. I know he writes a lot of his films.
It's actually a great question. I don't know if he's ever directed somebody else's script, but predominantly he's a writer-director.
With his unique visual flair and ability to bring a lot of tension on screen, I would really like to see him pair with a very good writer. And see what could come of that collaboration.
That's what's interesting about like A Knock at the Cabin, because it's based off a book that's pretty good. So he had source material that he could really lean on, and he wasn't so like susceptible to many of the flaws that are in his films.
Yeah, totally. So going back to what you were saying earlier about this world that he is building in this film and how you feel like it fit in and stuff like that, I have quite a bit to say about that, because my main issue with M. Night Shyamalan films, I would say post maybe the Signs era, with a couple of maybe exceptions, I would put Split in that category as well. But I think my main issue is that the way he crafts his plot twists pass the lines of what's realistically plausible for the world he himself has created. And this seems opposite of what you had just said earlier. So that's why I'm finding this conversation to be increasingly more interesting. If something happens that seems outside the reality he has built, I am so easily taken out of the film, and that happened just in many instances within this film specifically. For example, when he repeatedly gets in places he shouldn't be and is constantly allowed and accepted, even though everyone working in this damn stadium knows there's a serial killer on the loose. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
And unbelievable. Now, in some of his other films, these twists fit more seamlessly because the reality he has created involves understandable elements natural to that film, such as the supernatural with The Sixth Sense or an alien invasion with Signs. But here, we're supposed to be in a regular concert for a major pop superstar, and the first mistake that I thought this film made was pretending that the feds would allow this concert to go on, knowing a serial killer would be present, putting every attendee at risk. It is so completely unbelievable, and thus I think diminishes my ability to have a vested interest in the film.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't care. Yeah, I understand. To me, the whole concept of the movie makes absolutely no sense. I got to get over the concept in the first 5 minutes of it.
That's the thing, is that I think that in the context of this film, the movie's treating it as if it could plausibly happen.
I understand your issue with the overall structure. I think one of the main issues that I have with the film is more the detailed conveniences. So, for instance, Josh Hartnett's character doesn't get by because he's so charming and he's able to manipulate people. It's a little bit of that, but mostly he's flying by the seat of his pants and he just finds stuff that works.
Yeah.
The SWAT team at one point, it says, they think he's an employee and they say, can we see your card? And he just happens to find a wallet and happens to put out a card and it just works.
He somehow gets into that food area and he turns up the heat on the oil and also puts these gigantic bottles of stuff that's going to explode in it.
I noticed too that the film has a habit of just cutting things that don't make sense. But I think on some level, the film knows how ridiculous that is, so it just decides to use movie logic and just skip it. I don't want to diminish those flaws because they are very apparent, and sometimes it's difficult for the film to persist even with all of those on screen. But I will say that once I accepted that that was just how this film was going to go, I did get wrapped up in not only its logic or its illogic, if you want to call it that, but its tension.
Fair enough. Like you said, some people can't look past all those discrepancies, and I'm definitely one of those people.
Yeah, one of the first movies we ever watched together was Skyfall, and you kept commenting on all the things that wouldn't happen. Like somebody kicked through a windshield with one kick, and you're like, that would never happen. Anyway, I don't think about that stuff much at all.
Anyways, on a bright side, I did quite enjoy Josh Hartnett's performance. I liked the way his character became more manic and abnormal as the film progressed, this slow unraveling and revealing of his true self. I liked his endearing sincerity that he could turn on at the drop of a hat. There's some funny scenes between him and this other woman that's the mother of two daughters. She's trying to reconnect the daughters and he doesn't really want to do anything. Something happened between them and we don't even know what. But I did find the scenes interesting in relation to his character because they really showed his range of emotions, but also his quickness to change his tone and demeanor. And that really gives you the impression that, okay, this man could literally snap at any minute.
So he's very convincing as a loving father, I think, and even a doting father to some degree. And he's equally chilling when we see the serial killer side of him.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. Even as the film was poorly written, he is selling and carrying much of the tone here, both in the first half when it's a bit more jovial, he has to sell that he's a loving father. And in the second half, that's a lot more tension and creeps, you know?
And while we're on the subject of actors, I do want to quickly mention Saleka Shyamalan because she is M. Night Shyamalan's daughter. And she's the pop star in the film. And I actually thought she did a really good job with this. Interestingly enough, the music was really good.
Yeah,
I don't know
the music was great.
I think she's an artist, so I don't know if that's actually her songs that are being played.
They are. She wrote 13 songs for the film, and she also has an album. I haven't heard the album, but I thought the songs were good.
There's one particular sequence towards the end of the movie where she's playing with a piano. I thought that song was absolutely brilliant. If not, it seemed a little bit fit for a movie that's taking itself a little bit more seriously than this film was. So I'm not sure it quite fit in the film, but I actually really enjoyed the song and the sequence. I thought it was very poignant.
We think about things like Sofia Coppola and Godfather 3, how there's this nepotism of casting your daughter in a film. So I'm really glad that she overcame that. I thought that she sold a lot of the more incredulous aspects of the film.
Now, I know I've been coming across a little bit critical in this review, so I do want to talk about some things that I liked, and that would be that I do think the film really satisfied this type of 90s, 2000s tense thriller that I didn't realize I'd kind of been missing in the theaters. There were moments where I found myself really holding my breath at what might happen, mainly the living room scene towards the end of the film. And other times, I really enjoyed the nervous feeling of seeing other characters give him things, such as the box knife, and us knowing that he could do something very malicious with it. At one point, I remember I looked over at you, and you literally had your hand covering your mouth.
Especially during that sequence. I have to go to a quick spoilery thing, because I want to talk about the end of this film. So, spoiler alert, if you have not seen Trap, please turn this off. There weren't advanced reviews for this film, and I had seen the trailer, but one thing I didn't know was that we were going to leave the concert in the second half of the film.
Yeah.
So I was under the impression that the whole film would take place there for some reason, and maybe that was just an assumption of mine. But as they leave with Raven, and there's this delicate, tense undercurrent to the proceedings, there's like a genuine wonder at where is this film going? And I haven't felt that in a really long time. So that's when I was the most engaged. Again, how things shake out rely really intensely on conveniences, so I don't want to just cast that aside. But as this film progresses, it starts to explore a pretty dark and true to life subject, which is that serial killers often lead double lives, and they often have families. So a family is forced to confront a patriarch that they don't know at all. Someone that was loving to them during the day, but committing all these heinous acts at night. And I think that this film actually reckons with that on a kind of an interesting level. It's a very dark theme to contemplate. It's pretty far from the concept from the initial serial killer at a Taylor Swift concert, but I do really like that the movie went there.
I agree.
So you ready to go to grades?
I am ready to go to grades. I give this film a C+, with the exception of some bright spots such as Josh Hartnett's performance and some tension-inducing scenes, all of which we discussed. I sadly found the film to be quite forgettable. That being said, there are not many people I can think of that have as unique visual flair as M. Night Shyamalan does. Anyone familiar with his work, I think, could go into this film blind, not knowing who directed it, and could immediately peg it as an M. Night Shyamalan film. And I think that says something. His use of focus creates tension, loneliness, discomfort, or fear. His use of close-ups can create a sense of claustrophobia or impending doom. His filming choices and the way he crafts a scene are very particular to him as a director, something you had mentioned earlier, and something I really do admire in many of his films. I just wish that with like Signs, like The Sixth Sense, that this visual flair would complement a little bit more the reality of the narrative he was building in this film.
I totally understand that. I give this film a B-, so I guess I'm not too far off from you, but I'm definitely being a little forgiving. I think our viewers have seen me eviscerate certain films and get really stuck on certain things. I think this film has a point of view, and I think parts of it are pretty well made, and that's enough for me. I do agree with you that I love his use of close-ups here. Like when people are speaking or reacting, it's almost as if they're right in your face, like somebody is talking way too close to you. So the inherent discomfort of that, it really amplifies the tension the film is going for.
Even in the theater, you feel like your own personal bubble is being popped.
Yeah, I really like that. And he loves a Dutch angle too. His films are very off kilter in the way that they're framed. So again, it's all the classical stuff that makes a film really tense. I think that on some level, this is a successful film, especially from a technical perspective, but in all the ways we detailed, especially with these conveniences, especially with these plot contrivances, there are certainly some failures here.
So that's it for our review on Trap. Trap is now in theaters, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Let us know in the comments, what did you think about this film? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.